I never thought a family brunch could feel like a battlefield, but there I was, sitting across Bianca, my sister, who couldn't stop sneering at Owen, my husband, calling him a lowly farmer. I smiled politely, though my cheeks burned. My parents whispered about wealth and success, clearly siding with her. And then Bianca laughed, louder this time. Maybe you should sell that dirt you call land to help us out. My heart froze, but Owen's hand brushed mine, calm and knowing. Do you see what I see? There's more to our little farm than anyone imagines. I arrived at the family brunch, trying to keep my shoulders straight and my smile polite, though every step felt heavier than the last. Bianca had already taken her seat at the long dining table, draped in silk and pearls, Lucas sitting beside her like a perfectly polished trophy. Their laughter carried across the room, sharp and deliberate, as if to announce to everyone that they were the only ones who mattered. My parents, sitting at the head of the table, whispered words I could just barely catch about success, achievements, and the kind of people who marry well. The sting of their approval of Bianca's choices and the implied disappointment in mine pricked at me like a persistent thorn. Owen squeezed my hand under the table, his quiet presence grounding me. I looked at him, my husband of 10 years, the man they all deemed insignificant. They didn't see the calm strength in his hands, the depth of his knowledge about every inch of our land, the care he poured into nurturing crops that sustained not just our family, but our small community. To them, he was a farmer, a lowly one at that, and I was a fool for choosing him. Bianca tilted her head toward me, her smile sharp and mocking. Clara, I still don't understand why you married a farmer, she said, her tone a mix of amusement and disdain. With Lucas and I, we have everything figured out. Investments, businesses, futures. And you have dirt under your nails and a field that smells like manure. She laughed, the sound echoing through the room, bouncing off the walls, making it impossible not to feel small. Everyone at the table chuckled along, some nervously, some eagerly, feeding the tension she had created. I kept my smile, nodded politely, and said nothing. Words would only feed the fire, and I had learned long ago that silence could carry its own weight. My mind drifted briefly to the morning dew on our cornfields, the early sunlight casting long shadows over rows of green, the earthy scent that to me was life and sustenance, not shame. I reminded myself that Owen and I had built a life that was solid, real, and meaningful in ways money could never buy. The conversation turned toward Lucas's latest venture, a risky tech startup that had somehow captivated the entire family. Bianca's eyes sparkled as she described the millions invested and the even larger profits they anticipated. She leaned closer to me, lowering her voice just enough for me to hear, and said, Honestly, Clara, maybe you should sell that little patch of land you call your farm. Help us expand the business. We'd even think of you in the deal, of course. Time seemed to slow. I could feel the air press against my chest, my fingers tightening around Owen's hand under the table. I could see the little smirk forming at the corner of Bianca's mouth, triumphant, certain she had won this round. My parents exchanged glances, and I could almost hear the unspoken words. This is how families support each other, isn't it? But Owen leaned closer, brushing his hand over mine again, his calm reassurance a silent promise that this was not the end of the story. I imagined the farm, our little kingdom, stretching across the fields we had worked tirelessly to nurture. Each fence post, each row of crops, each barn that creaked under the weight of years was more valuable than Bianca realized. Not in dollars, at least not yet, but in something she had never understood: stability, resilience, and pride that could not be purchased. Bianca's laughter rang again, louder, sharper, trying to pierce the bubble of calm I created around myself. I forced a breath, reminding myself that I didn't need to defend every inch of our life to them. Let them believe what they wanted. But the tension inside me didn't dissipate. It wound tighter, a rope coiling around my thoughts. I could feel every eye on me, anticipating my response. Would I nod? Would I protest? Or would I let the silence speak volumes? My gaze found Owen's again, and he raised an eyebrow subtly, the smallest hint of amusement tugging at his lips. That glance told me something crucial. He had known this moment would come, and he had a plan, a secret, something he had been quietly preparing over the years while the world watched him as nothing more than a simple farmer. And for the first time, a flicker of anticipation stirred in me. Not fear, not anger, but the kind of excitement that comes when you know you are about to reveal a truth no one expects. I thought about the mornings we spent walking the edges of our property, discussing soil quality, crop rotation, and the subtle art of nurturing the land in ways most people would overlook. Those conversations had been our sanctuary, the quiet heartbeat of our life together. They had been planning, unknowingly, a future that none of them could have imagined. And now, with everyone watching, I felt a strange mixture of nerves and satisfaction, knowing that the game had only just begun. Bianca leaned back, satisfied with her performance, while I took a deep breath and let my eyes sweep over the room. My parents' expressions were unreadable, a mix of curiosity and impatience. I could feel the pressure of their expectations, their disappointment, their desire for me to conform. But I had Owen, and together we had built something they could never diminish, something real, something enduring, and something that would soon shift the balance of power in ways they would never see coming. The sunlight streamed through the tall windows, glinting off the silverware, highlighting the tension that hung thick in the room. I realized in that moment that I had a choice. I could let Bianca's words cut me down, or I could wait, watch, and let the story unfold on my terms. Owen's subtle smile, the touch of his hand, reminded me that patience could be a weapon more powerful than anger. I leaned back slightly, a small, almost imperceptible smile forming on my lips. I allowed Bianca to bask in her perceived victory for a moment longer, knowing that the truth, the real truth of our farm, our life, our unassuming power, was coming. And when it did, the silence would speak louder than any of her laughter ever could. Can you see it too, reader? Do you feel the calm before the storm, the quiet that hides a reckoning no one expects? The news came like a sudden gust of wind, knocking the room off balance before anyone had a chance to brace themselves. Lucas's tech startup had collapsed, wiped out in a single week by a series of bad investments and a volatile market. Bianca's face, usually so composed, turned a shade of white I had never seen before. She clutched at the edge of the table as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. The chatter around the brunch stopped, replaced by whispers of shock and disbelief. I could almost hear the panic rising in the room, a tide that threatened to sweep everything in its path. My parents exchanged hurried glances, their whispered words sharper now, edged with anxiety. They leaned toward me, their voices low but unmistakable. "Clara, perhaps it's time to think about selling some of your land. You could help us, help Bianca and Lucas get back on their feet." The words landed like stones, heavy and demanding. I felt a tightening in my chest, a pressure I hadn't anticipated, though I had long known that my family measured loyalty in dollars rather than integrity. I nodded slowly, letting a calm mask cover the storm brewing inside me. If they expected panic or desperation, they were about to be disappointed. I felt Owen's hand on mine beneath the table, a gentle but firm reminder that we were in this together. His gaze was steady, unreadable, but I caught the faintest glimmer of a plan already set in motion. He had never been just a farmer, never someone whose value could be measured by how the world judged him. And now, as the room waited for me to falter, he whispered a single word under his breath. "Watch." Bianca's eyes flicked toward me, impatience and expectation mingling in their glare. "Surely you understand, Clara, that helping us is the right thing to do," she said, her voice laced with entitlement. I forced a small, polite smile and tilted my head, pretending to consider it. Every inch of me screamed to stay firm, but I let just enough hesitation show to keep them guessing. Would I fold under pressure? Would I sell off our life's work for the sake of appeasing them? Their eyes were glued to mine, waiting, anticipating, needing me to make a mistake. Owen leaned closer, his voice barely above a whisper but clear in my ear. "Let them think they have a chance. We'll reveal it when the time is right." I swallowed the rising heat in my throat and nodded subtly. The farm had been our sanctuary, our secret, our quiet empire hidden behind the illusion of simplicity. It had taken years to build, and every crop, every fence, every barn was a testament to our patience and foresight. I knew that revealing it now at the wrong moment would diminish its impact. Timing, Owen reminded me, was as important as strategy. My mind drifted briefly to the mornings spent walking the boundaries of our land, discussing soil quality, irrigation plans, and subtle crop rotations that increased yield without drawing attention. Each detail, each decision was a piece of the puzzle Bianca and Lucas could never hope to understand. I allowed myself a moment to breathe, to feel the calm settle over me like a protective blanket. This was our space, our rhythm, our life untouched by their judgment. The tension in the room remained high, but within me I found a pocket of serenity. Bianca's voice cut through my reverie, sharp and insistent. "Clara, are you listening? Or do you really expect us to just sit back while you keep everything?" I met her gaze, letting the smallest flicker of uncertainty show, just enough to keep her hooked. She leaned forward, convinced she had a grip on the situation, unaware that every calculated pause, every measured gesture was orchestrated by Owen and me. Micro cliffhanger. Would I capitulate or hold my ground? I glanced toward my parents, sensing their discomfort as the magnitude of Lucas's losses sank in. Their pressure was relentless, and yet I realized something vital. They had no real understanding of what we had. They saw only a patch of land, not the foundation of stability, not the quiet power it represented. Owen's calm presence reminded me that appearances were deceiving, that the most dangerous moments often carried a hidden advantage if you could just remain still long enough to see it. The room felt suffocating, a pressure cooker of expectation and desperation. I inhaled slowly, grounding myself in the rhythm of our life. The creak of barn doors in the morning, the smell of soil after rain, the steady hum of machinery that ran our farm quietly, efficiently. These were the small victories, the invisible successes that built a life far beyond the superficial measures of wealth that Bianca so flaunted. Owen squeezed my hand again, and for a moment, a spark of amusement touched his eyes. It was as if he were daring them to underestimate him, to assume he was ordinary. They couldn't see the months of planning, the years of careful growth that had positioned us where we were, and I felt a flicker of confidence that mirrored his. They had demanded a reaction, a submission, and I had found my footing on solid ground. I allowed my eyes to scan the room once more, noting every flicker of doubt, every tremor of unease. Bianca thought she had cornered me, but she hadn't even scratched the surface. My parents, worried and anxious, were too distracted to notice the quiet power radiating from us, and Lucas, flustered and defensive, had no idea that the game was not only still ours to play, it was entirely in our control. As I let my calm settle over the table like a slow tide, I whispered to myself, barely audible, "They have no idea what's coming." The tension lingered, thick and heavy, yet within it, a seed of anticipation grew. The farm, our sanctuary, our quiet empire, held secrets that would soon shift the balance of power entirely. Do you see it too, reader? Can you feel the tension mounting, the calm before the storm, the unspoken strategy that will soon unfold in ways no one here expects? We arrived at the farm just as the sun had begun to climb higher in the sky, casting golden light over what appeared to be a modest stretch of land. Bianca's expression was already twisted with condescension, and I could hear her muttering under her breath about how underwhelming it all seemed. Lucas glanced around, frowning, counting the acres, probably calculating the return in his head. I kept my smile polite, letting them believe that they had walked into nothing more than a simple, sleepy farm. Owen walked confidently ahead, waving at the fences, the rows of crops, the weathered barns that creaked in the wind. "This is where the magic happens," he said casually, his tone light, almost joking. I noticed Bianca rolling her eyes, muttering something about primitive methods and wasted space, while Lucas was already scanning the horizon, no doubt plotting his ideas to monetize this land. The first shock came when we reached the main barn. Bianca stepped inside and froze. The interior was not the rustic, underdeveloped structure she expected. Instead, it hummed with machinery, sensors blinking on large screens, automatic irrigation systems adjusting themselves in real time. Crates of produce were already prepped for nationwide distribution. The smell of fresh vegetables and grains mixed with the faint aroma of polished wood and new technology. Her eyes widened and her smug expression faltered. Is this automated? Bianca stammered, unable to fully grasp what she was seeing. Lucas's mouth fell open, and for a moment, they looked like children caught sneaking into a place far beyond their understanding. Owen smiled, a slow, controlled grin as he guided them past the sleek equipment. Yes, he said casually. It took a lot of planning, years of work, but it functions entirely on its own. And the returns. He let the words hang in the air, knowing the impact. I could feel Bianca's confidence crumbling with every step. Each detail Owen revealed, the climate-controlled storage, the carefully tracked yields, the proprietary technology we had invested in quietly, added weight to the reality they had underestimated. The farm wasn't just successful, it was a hidden empire, thriving in ways they had never imagined. I saw the color drain from Bianca's face, her mouth opening as if she wanted to argue but could not. Micro cliffhanger. She was speechless, frozen in a moment that would be etched into her memory. We moved to the fields, and Owen gestured to the rows of crops stretching farther than the eye could see. Everything you see here, he said, is not just for our local market. Contracts are nationwide, distribution centers, partnerships with multiple retailers. The value is far beyond what anyone could guess. And these, he nodded toward the machinery hidden among the plants, are our secret investments that multiply our revenue beyond visible assets. The meaning of his words hit them fully. Bianca turned toward Lucas, disbelief written across her features, and I could almost hear her thoughts scrambling for an explanation that didn't exist. I felt a warmth rising in my chest, not from triumph, but from the satisfaction of quiet justice. I hadn't shouted, hadn't flaunted our achievements. I had simply let the truth speak for itself. Owen had always understood the power of subtlety, and now the family could see it firsthand. Their mockery, their assumptions, had crumbled against the reality we had built in silence. As Bianca struggled to compose herself, I took a moment to breathe in the fresh air, the scent of earth and growth mingling in a way that felt familiar and comforting. I looked over at Owen, and his eyes met mine with a glimmer of pride. He had known all along how this moment would unfold, and I had known that our patience, our dedication, our quiet effort would not be in vain. Owen led them to the farmhouse, still appearing modest from the outside. The interior, however, revealed yet another layer of the empire. Sleek, functional, yet completely understated. Clara, the real Clara, who had been standing by his side this entire time, was officially named on all the property titles. The ownership papers were ready to be shown, a twist so simple and elegant that even Lucas's mind, trained in finance, had trouble processing it. I watched Bianca's shoulders slump slightly, the fight draining from her as she realized she had misjudged everything. She had thought she was helping herself by pressuring me, by relying on the assumption that we were powerless. Instead, she was witnessing the quiet power of two people who had built a life on strategy, knowledge, and patience, rather than boasting and speculation. We walked back through the fields, Owen explaining how each segment of the farm had been carefully planned, how each crop rotation and machinery upgrade was designed to maximize yield and sustainability. I felt a profound sense of peace, a calm that came from knowing that our hard work and foresight had created not just wealth, but security. It was not the triumph of arrogance. It was the triumph of diligence, subtlety, and intelligent planning. The family's reaction was a mix of awe and disbelief. My parents exchanged nervous glances, realizing perhaps too late that they had underestimated us. Lucas's face, red with embarrassment and confusion, mirrored Bianca's stunned silence. I felt no satisfaction in their discomfort, only a quiet acknowledgement that the scales had shifted. Owen's hand brushed mine again, a simple gesture that said everything words could not. We had proven something important, that value was not always visible, that appearances could deceive, and that patience and intelligence could change the course of perception entirely. The micro cliffhanger lingered in the air, unspoken but potent. The farm was more than a place. It was a foundation, a secret empire, and a future still largely hidden from them. As we left the tour, I allowed myself a small smile, letting the warmth of accomplishment settle in. The world had underestimated us, and now it had a glimpse of what it had overlooked. Yet the true power remained reserved, the final reveal still to come. And in that moment, I felt the deep satisfaction of quiet triumph, knowing that the story was far from over. Owen's subtle hints, the ownership papers, the carefully orchestrated reveal, they were all pieces of a puzzle that would continue to unfold. Can you see it too, reader? Do you feel the weight of what has been quietly built, the anticipation of the next revelation yet to come? The tension in the room was palpable as we returned from the farm. My parents' faces were tight, eyes flicking nervously between Bianca, Lucas, and me. I could feel the weight of their expectation pressing down, the subtle insistence that I should offer a solution, give in to their demands. "Clara," my father began, his voice firm but edged with worry. "We think it's time you considered selling part of your land. It could help Bianca and Lucas recover. It's for the family." I glanced at Owen, who stood calmly beside me, his hands folded, his expression unshakable. He had never been one to raise his voice or show anger, but the confidence emanating from him in that moment made it clear that nothing would unsettle our plan. "Father, Mother," I said, my voice even, "you need to understand something. The land is mine, yes, and Owen and I have invested years of labor, knowledge, and resources into it. Its value is not in what you see, but in what it generates, and it's enough to sustain our family and our future." A silence fell over the room. Bianca's eyes narrowed, suspicion and disbelief flashing across her face. Lucas shifted uncomfortably in his chair, finally catching on to the reality that he had been blind to all along. "Wait," he said, his voice faltering. "Are you saying that we're entirely dependent on this farm? That our investments mean nothing compared to it?" Owen nodded, a small, calm smile playing on his lips. "Exactly. All your calculations, all your strategies, they mean nothing if you can't even see the foundation that supports you. The farm is self-sufficient, profitable, and, yes, powerful beyond appearances. We've been quietly expanding it, modernizing it, preparing it for growth. Everything you've assumed about us has been wrong." Bianca's lips parted, but no sound came out. She looked down briefly, perhaps realizing the extent of her misjudgment, the depth of her own arrogance. I could see her struggle, the internal conflict playing across her face, to accept reality or to continue denying it. Micro cliffhanger. Would she accept the truth and the limits it imposed, or would she attempt another scheme, another manipulation to regain control? I took a steady breath and allowed the room to settle around us. The storm of expectations and judgments was still there, but I felt a quiet sense of control, a power that did not require force or anger. I had learned long ago that true strength is subtle, that dignity and patience often speak louder than confrontation. "I understand your position," I said, my voice calm, "but I cannot sell what is ours to give. It is not just land. It is our livelihood, our life's work, and our security. Owen and I are responsible for it, and it is not a tool to bail out failed ventures." My parents' faces tightened further, a mixture of frustration and helplessness. Bianca's hands clenched in her lap, knuckles white. Lucas looked as if he were recalculating everything he had ever assumed about power and success. Yet, in the midst of their shock, I remained composed. There was no anger in my tone, no harsh words, only a quiet assertion of boundaries that I knew would resonate more powerfully than any argument. Owen's presence beside me was like a steady anchor. He had allowed me to speak first, to set the tone, and his calm authority reinforced every word I said. I saw the change in my parents' expressions. They were beginning to understand that their assumptions about generosity and obligation were misplaced. Helping someone is meaningful only when it is welcomed, not demanded. Bianca finally raised her eyes, meeting mine briefly. There was a flicker of respect in that glance, though it was quickly masked by the frustration she could not contain. She swallowed hard, perhaps realizing that she had underestimated us, that the person she had mocked and dismissed had quietly built something far beyond her imagination. The micro cliffhanger lingered in the air. Would she accept her humbled position, or attempt to challenge us in another way? I allowed a soft smile to play on my lips. My voice softened, even warmer, as I said, "I hope you can see that Owen and I are not trying to punish anyone. We are protecting what is ours, what we have worked for, and I trust that in time you will understand why this is necessary." My words carried no malice, only clarity and resolve. The room, still thick with tension, seemed to respond to the sincerity in my tone. For a moment, I let myself relax, feeling the calm rise between the spikes of anxiety and expectation. This was our rhythm. A pause, a breath, a chance for the message to settle. The emotional arc mirrored the farm itself, steady, deliberate, and resilient. In this brief pause, I could sense Owen's satisfaction too. He had known how the confrontation would unfold, had anticipated every reaction, and allowed me to handle it in a way that maintained dignity while asserting authority. My parents finally exchanged a look that conveyed both acknowledgement and reluctant acceptance. Lucas's posture slumped slightly, a silent concession that he had misjudged the situation. Bianca's eyes still flitted nervously, but her bowed head suggested the first seeds of humility. I felt a quiet satisfaction. Not triumph over them, but a serene assurance that boundaries had been set, that respect had been earned, and that we had maintained our integrity. I glanced at Owen again, and his subtle nod reminded me that the story was not yet over. There would be more challenges, more tests of patience and judgment, but in this moment, we had emerged intact, confident, and dignified. We had turned a confrontation that could have shattered relationships into an opportunity to demonstrate the quiet power of preparedness, understanding, and composure. The room remained heavy with tension, but I felt the warmth of calm authority settle over me. My decisions, our decisions, had created a ripple that would echo through our family for years to come. The micro cliffhanger hung quietly at the edges of consciousness. What would Bianca do next? And would she fully embrace the lesson she had learned, or would she seek another way to challenge what she had failed to understand? Only time would reveal that, but for now, I allowed myself to savor the gentle satisfaction of having stood firm, confident in the strength of the life Owen and I had built together. The days that followed were a whirlwind of news, rumors, and whispers that seemed to follow Bianca and Lucas wherever they went. Their financial collapse, once private, had become a spectacle. Social media feeds were flooded with speculation, critiques, and the occasional cruel joke about how quickly they had lost everything. I observed the chaos from the quiet safety of our home, the farm standing firm like a monument to the life Owen and I had quietly built. I could see the contrast clearly. While they scrambled and panicked, our world remained calm, productive, and secure. Bianca's face, once so confident and polished, now showed fatigue and anxiety. Her Instagram stories, which used to showcase glamour and perfection, had become a reluctant display of damage control, carefully curated to hide the panic in her eyes. Lucas spent hours on phone calls, desperately attempting to salvage what little remained, but each effort seemed more futile than the last. And through it all, the irony was not lost on me. I had once been the target of their mockery, and now their desperation was a quiet, satisfying counterpoint to their previous arrogance. Yet I did not allow myself to indulge too deeply in their discomfort. Revenge, I reminded myself, had never been the goal. There was a subtle satisfaction in watching them face the natural consequences of their choices. but it was tempered by empathy for their humanity. Instead, I focused on the farm, on the small, deliberate steps Owen and I had taken over the years that allowed us to thrive quietly, invisibly, until now. I thought back to the decision we had made months ago to allocate a portion of the farm's profits for moments like this, lessons for the family, a subtle reminder that actions carry consequences, and that arrogance can blind even the cleverest people. It had been a small, secretive reserve, a lesson fund that would now serve its purpose. We had always believed in teaching through experience rather than confrontation, and this was the moment the principle manifested fully. The twist was elegant, hidden in plain sight, a carefully laid plan that neither Bianca nor Lucas had anticipated. As the week progressed, my phone buzzed with messages of support from neighbors, old friends, and even distant relatives who had been observing the drama unfold. Their words were simple but profound, acknowledging the integrity and patience Owen and I had demonstrated. Community respect, I realized, was far more valuable than any fleeting wealth or superficial status. It was a testament not only to what we had built materially, but also to the manner in which we conducted ourselves. I watched Owen walk across the fields one morning, his gaze sweeping over the crops and machinery that had become both our livelihood and our secret advantage. There was a quiet pride in his posture, a confidence that came not from boasting, but from knowing the depth of our preparation and foresight. I felt it too, a deep warmth, the calm that comes from understanding that we had done what was right, measured, and enduring. Bianca's attempts to salvage her public image seemed almost comical now. Every carefully worded post, every staged photo, every defensive statement only reinforced the contrast between her desperation and our composed stability. The community began to notice too, some quietly admiring the patience and intelligence that had led to our quiet prosperity. Their whispers of admiration reached even the ears of our parents, who began to see that Clara and Owen had been underestimated in ways that could no longer be ignored. I smiled quietly to myself. Walking through the barn where crates of produce were being prepared for shipment, Owen's hand brushed mine, his subtle touch grounding me in the moment. "It's working," he said softly, his eyes twinkling with quiet amusement. "They're learning, in their own way." I nodded, understanding fully. The lesson was not cruel. It was a natural consequence, an unfolding of reality that required no intervention beyond the steady presence of truth and preparation. The joy of this quiet victory was tempered with patience. We knew Bianca might attempt further maneuvers, perhaps subtle ones, to regain some sense of control or superiority. But for now, the balance had shifted and the lesson had been delivered with precision. The contrast between her frantic attempts to restore status and our composed efficiency was a visual and emotional confirmation of the power of foresight, intelligence, and humility. Later that evening, as the sun dipped low behind the fields, casting long shadows across the farm, I reflected on the path we had traveled. From the early days of tending soil and planting seeds to this moment of quiet triumph, it had been a journey of diligence, resilience, and understated strategy. I felt a soft satisfaction, not in their suffering, but in the confirmation that patience and intelligence could shape outcomes far more powerfully than impulsive decisions or arrogance ever could. Community members stopped by the farm, offering congratulations, sharing stories of how they had noticed our methods and admired the results. Their words reinforced what Owen and I had always known. True influence and respect are earned, not demanded, and visibility is far less important than integrity and competence. The emotional rhythm was a gentle wave, the tension of watching Bianca struggle, the calm satisfaction of seeing our principles validated, and a hint of anticipation for what the future might hold. I glanced at Owen as he inspected the irrigation systems, and a knowing look passed between us. There were plans yet to unfold, strategies yet to reveal, and the farm, our empire in miniature, was still a living, breathing instrument of our foresight. The suspense lingered in the air, subtle but persistent, suggesting that while the immediate challenge had been addressed, the story was far from finished. As night fell and the farm settled into quiet productivity, I allowed myself a final, deep breath. The contrast was undeniable. Bianca and Lucas scrambling for control, the public watching, the whispers of judgment and envy swirling around them, while Owen and I walked calmly among the fields we had nurtured with patience and care. The narrative had shifted, and I could feel the long-term impact, both emotional and practical. The payoff was quiet, elegant, and deeply satisfying, a triumph achieved without harshness, without malice, only through patience, planning, and integrity. The sun had begun its slow descent behind the hills, casting long shadows across the farm, and I found myself walking along the familiar paths that had shaped so much of my life. Each row of crops, each barn, every fence post bore witness to years of patience, care, and quiet diligence. I paused for a moment, inhaling the scent of freshly turned soil mixed with the faint aroma of autumn leaves, and reflected on everything that had transpired over the past weeks. It had been a journey not just of confrontation, but of understanding the subtle power of patience, humility, and careful planning. I thought of Bianca and Lucas, watching from a distance as they adjusted to the consequences of their choices. Their struggle had not been pleasant to witness, but it had illuminated a fundamental truth. Arrogance and haste can only take one so far. True influence, true resilience comes from steady effort, from thoughtfulness, and from the courage to act without seeking immediate approval. I smiled softly to myself, realizing how much Owen and I had achieved not through showmanship or confrontation, but through quiet intelligence and unwavering resolve. Owen appeared beside me, his presence calm and grounding. We walked in silence for a few moments, simply observing the land we had nurtured together. "This is only the beginning," he said, his voice low, deliberate, carrying the weight of unspoken plans. I nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. The farm, impressive though it was, represented only the foundation of something far greater. There were expansions, innovations, and opportunities still waiting, projects that would challenge us in new ways, even as they promised continued growth. The subtle twist of our narrative was that we were far from done. Our quiet empire still had layers yet to be revealed. As the evening light softened the edges of the buildings and fields, I allowed myself a pause. I let the satisfaction settle, the gentle warmth of accomplishment that came from knowing we had stood firm and maintained our integrity. Unlike the harsh victories celebrated in stories of power and revenge, this triumph was quiet, dignified, and deeply personal. It was the kind of win that leaves the heart lighter, the mind sharper, and the spirit stronger. I thought about the lessons I had learned in recent weeks. Patience is not passive. It is a deliberate choice to wait for the right moment. Humility is not weakness. It is a quiet form of strength that allows insight and wisdom to accumulate. And intelligence, when paired with foresight and integrity, can shape outcomes far beyond the superficial measures of success that others rely on. These were lessons etched into every decision Owen and I had made, and now they were visible in the world around us. Bianca's demeanor had shifted subtly in these days. I noticed her glancing at our farm with a mixture of curiosity and unease, the first signs that she was internalizing the lesson she had once mocked. It was not yet a complete change, but the hint of growth was there, a possibility for reconciliation or understanding in the future. I allowed myself a brief moment to hope, knowing that the power of humility often comes slowly and can be as transformative as any financial lesson. Walking past the automated irrigation systems, I reflected on how far we had come from the early mornings of planting, fertilizing, and careful observation. Every system, every decision, every investment had been deliberate, and the results were undeniable. Yet even as I admired what we had built, a subtle excitement stirred within me. The farm was a foundation, yes, but it was also a canvas for future ventures. The story was far from over, and the micro cliffhanger lingered in my mind. There were hints of new challenges on the horizon, a financial twist perhaps, or an opportunity that could test our judgment once more. Owen glanced at me, his eyes gleaming with quiet amusement. "Do you feel it too?" he asked, his tone playful yet serious. "The calm now, it's temporary. The next step is coming, and it will require everything we've learned." I nodded, feeling a rush of anticipation that mingled with contentment. The suspense was subtle but persistent, the kind that makes one aware that life continues to unfold in unexpected ways, even when victories have been achieved. As darkness settled over the fields, the farm transformed under the glow of lanterns and distant lights. There was a rhythm to it, a life of its own, and I felt the deep satisfaction of knowing that what we had built was enduring. The lessons for Bianca and Lucas had been delivered not with force, but with integrity and patience. The family dynamics, once so tense and fraught, now had a chance to recalibrate, hinting at growth and understanding in the future. I paused by the edge of the main field, watching the wind ripple through the crops. In that moment, I realized that the farm was more than land or profit. It was a testament to resilience, foresight, and quiet determination. And while the immediate drama had passed, the subtle hints of future challenges lingered, keeping the sense of suspense alive. A small envelope lay tucked in Owen's desk drawer, a reminder that life was rarely without its twists, and that the narrative we had begun would continue to evolve, quietly shaping the family and the community around us. Finally, I allowed myself a full, deep breath. The victories were ours, the lessons delivered, the respect earned. Yet there was the ever-present thrill of anticipation, the knowledge that the farm, our life, and our quiet empire were still growing, still evolving. The evening air carried the faint promise of new possibilities, and I felt the subtle excitement of challenges yet to come. This was not an ending, it was a carefully measured continuation, a story that honored patience, intelligence, and the enduring strength of a life well built.